Hey everybody, it's Peter, and in this video we are going to do an in-depth comparison review of the Versys 1000 versus the Versys 650. Now, I'm a huge fan of both these bikes, and there's a value equation here that I think we need to talk about, because it used to be the 650 sort of filled a lot of people's needs, and then the 1000 gave you more power. But there's a significant price jump from the 650 to jump to this bike, and I still think this is a fantastic value even given that price jump. And I think part of the reason that I think that is because I understand some of the technologies in this bike and some of the features that make it really, really good. So what we're going to do is do a review of the 650, do a basic overview of that, and talk about what this bike adds to that to help you decide which bike is best for you. Now, I understand that from a price point, you may not be comparing them side by side, but a lot of people want to know the differences between the 650 and the 1000 because there is so much price difference in them, and I'm going to help you walk through that to help you decide which one's best for you. So I'm filming here at Jim Gilbert's Wheels and Deals, Jim Gilbert's PowerSports. They are the #1 volume Kawasaki dealer in the country, and they give me complete access to their entire vehicle lineup. So if you have questions about these bikes, I would be happy to answer them. Make sure you subscribe and let me know in the comments what you want to know about either of these bikes or anything in the lineup, and I will come back to you both in the comment section and in future videos to make sure we build a video database of information here for you. And also, if you own either of these bikes and you have experience with them, let us know what you like about them. Tell us in the comment section so that people can sort of see why you bought them, why you like them, and what's so great. All right, let's get going with the full review. All right, so we're going to start by going over this 650, but I should clarify there is another vehicle in the Versys lineup, the Versys X300. I have plenty of videos online of that as well, so you can check out those, but it doesn't really fit in this comparison because there's just so much detail to go over, and that's what this video is. This video is going to go into the detail here to show you things that the other videos aren't showing you, and I didn't want it to be too long by trying to cover 3 bikes, and there really isn't a lot of similarity between the X300 and the 1000 on top end. So you can compare that to the 300 to this, you compare this to the 1000, but there's nobody that's really cross-shopping that 300 with the 1000. So let's be fully clear as well. Like I said, I was a fan of this bike. I've owned this bike. I owned the slightly previous version, which was just slightly modified. This one's got some updated dash, but let's place this in the Kawasaki lineup. This has the 650 engine that I've described as the perfect street engine for motorcycles. For most people, it's going to be everything you need. It's friendly enough to be a beginner rider friendly type engine. It is absolutely powerful enough for most people, and it's a lot of fun. So we're going to talk about how it fits in here, because out of that 650 lineup, you can basically get a bike in any class. This one here is the most expensive version of that 650 engine, and I think it's well earned. So it has a few little things. It is the only one with an upside down suspension out front and adjustable suspension. You also have a preload adjuster here that's right there. You can adjust the preload. You've got an adjustable windshield. You've got the hand guards. You've got the full technology suite that you have everywhere else. And physically, it does appear to be a slightly larger bike. I didn't even talk about the bags on the back, which absolutely adds value. So let's talk about what this bike is by coming in a little bit closer. So the entire Versys lineup is styled like the adventure class of bikes, but in reality they aren't adventure bikes. The X300 does have some on-off-road tires, but from the 650 on up, these are sport touring bikes with an upright square seating position. And we'll show you the seating position in a little bit in this video. But like I said, everything here is top of the line 650 stuff. Even the signal lights are LED signal lights. And you may think, well, that's not a big deal, but there are a lot of bikes in the Kawasaki lineup in North America that don't actually get these LED signal lights. So you've got good stuff. We mentioned the upside down suspension here. We mentioned, I don't know if we mentioned, but the dual discs here. And again, this is adjustable for preload and compression. So you have a lot of adjustability in the front forks here. You've got good solid brakes here. There is an upgrade on the 1000 that we'll talk about, and decent tires here. So what you end up with is a bike with great wind protection, not just from the adjustable windshield, which I'll show you right here, comes up and down very easily on a quick release thing. Great wind protection over the hands, but also from the bodywork here. The bodywork gives your legs good protection, so you can really ride this in the very cool weather. In addition to, if it gets warmer, you're fine there as well. But it sort of extends the riding season, and that's one of the big reasons I like this bike, is when it's cooler, especially if it's a cool morning and a nice afternoon, you can ride this in the morning, no problem. If you get on tour and it gets a little cold, you're fine as well. And if it pours rain, you have some weather protection just in the shape of the aerodynamics of it. So while it is a touring bike, it really is a sport touring bike as well. The 650 class is the Ninja 650 engine. And this one, for most people, is all the sport bike you ever need. Unless you're going to the track, you'll probably find that you have no issues keeping up with your friends on similar powered sporty bikes, just because this has good suspension, decent tires, and overall geometry that works very well for on-road sport riding. So for a lot of people, this is all the sport bike they'll ever need, and for a lot of people, it's all the touring bike they ever need. And compared to the 1000, this gives you a little bit more of a playful ride. So let me show you what it's like to sit on. We'll talk about a couple other little things. So before I sit on it, I should probably mention that when you do sit on this bike, it is a long reach across here because you've got these bags here. The bags are standard, but they do come off easily. You use the regular key, they come off, they fit a full face helmet. We've showed you them in other videos, so I'm probably not gonna open them up right now, but if you wanna know, let me know in the comments what you wanna see and we'll make sure we make videos. So jumping across here, the one thing with the Versys lineup is they are all fairly tall bikes. If you're a very short rider, this is something you're gonna have to try out for sure. If you're average height or taller, this is going to be fine. You can see here, I'm about 6 feet tall, my heels are flat on the ground, so it's no big deal there. It's a very manageable bike for someone like me. As you sit on this bike, for a sporty riding position, you're not in a tucked over position, but you're in a very comfortable position where there's really no weight on your hands and it's very good to ride all day. But it is quite flickable left to right. It does have the largest fuel tank of any of the 650 bikes, or at least the bikes with this 650 engine in the class. And that can mean that it does have some weight up top when it's full, but it also gives you a ton more range. So like I said, for a sporty bike, it's great. I have described this in the past as the perfect single person touring bike. You can absolutely take a passenger on this, and you can take them for an afternoon, for a weekend, whatever you want. What you'll find with a passenger on this bike though is that playfulness that still exists in a bike of this size does get dulled down a little bit with your passenger. Now it can absolutely carry the passenger because like I said, you have that adjustable preload right here, but that's where the 1000 steps in. If you're gonna do long tours with a passenger, the 1000 is going to be a better option for you. Not that this can't take a passenger, it absolutely can, but like I said, part of the fun of this bike is the playfulness of it, and when you put that second passenger on, it just dulls that playfulness just a little bit. Let's show you the dash and the features here before we move to the 1000 and start explaining some of the extra features there. All right, so if we talk about this bike's intended purpose, obviously it's fun, it's playful, you can use it to zip around town, you can use it to do your daily commute to work, you can take with the bags, you can take everything you would need for work, but it's also a touring bike. And what's cool about that is you have some ability to make it more touring capable for you. So looking on this side right over here, this is just a plastic panel, so is this. This can be punched out and you can get a Kawasaki accessory, which is a 12-volt port. If you're taking a GPS or something like that, you've got handlebars here to mount it. You've got a little rim right around here that they have mounting brackets for as well. You could put it sort of behind your windshield and above your dash. There's lots of places to mount a GPS and you could power it right there from the dash, which is super convenient. Then you have this, which is a little switch. You can add extra driving lights to this bike, and that would be where the switch goes for those. So that would be LED driving lights to complement your LED headlights, which is kind of nice. You can set them a little wider, get a little bit extra visibility. On the far side here, far side of your screen here, you'll see another little plastic thing that can be a cutout, and that is for a USB port. So if you're charging your phone or something like that, you can have a little USB port in here as well. What you can't see on the angle we're on right so much is the two different types of suspension adjustment, one on each fork tube, which is really handy. And what you can see is the dash coming to life. We're just gonna quickly cover the dash here because it's an all-in-one unit and it does have some cool things. So you know what, because I think I've got the angle I need without a whole lot of glare, let's just zoom right in and take a peek at that. All right, so what you have here is really nice. This is the full suite of information you're going to get on a 650 class bike in Kawasaki. Big thing to note is the traction control, KTRC. That is Kawasaki traction control. It is off, level 1 or level 2. Now it's not something that I feel is super needed on this bike. The previous version didn't have it and I didn't have any real issues, but it's really nice to know that it's there. You can drive this bike hard in traction control 1 and you really don't feel any intervention, but you know it's there for you. If you get into a rainy situation, you can put it in level 2, and that's gonna just help you control things a little bit better when the traction is a little bit less there. You've got a number of options in here down low for odometer, fuel efficiency, other things like that. We can show that in another video, but the point is you have everything you need. You can see the fuel right now is very low. When it gets to the very lowest part, you can't miss it. It blinks there. So when the last bar is fully lit, you still have some, and then of course you have the blinking when it's ready to go. We didn't turn the engine on, which is why the engine light is flashing right now, If we did that, that would go away as well. So really clear dash here. One thing to note is this is the typical way of Kawasaki doing this dash. They have the tachometer built into the digital display. So everything is right there in the digital display. The only reason I show you that is because it is a little different on the 1000cc, which has a different dash and a little bit different options. So we've kind of covered that. Let's bring the 1000 in and start talking about some differences, and then we're going to go sort of back and forth between the two bikes to show you a couple other cool things. So as we move to the Versys 1000, it is the same class of bike as far as a sport touring bike, but there's a lot of little differences in features that react to, or that cause you to have a different experience when you're riding. So although I'm going to show you these features, I hope that you pick up that it's not just the features that are different, this is a different experience to have. So let me just jump across this bike as well. Same thing, you have identical bags here. We're going to show you this. The seat does definitely appear to be a little wider. So again, it's a big step across, which isn't the end of the world if you're tall like me. This is a slight little bit taller than on the 650. My heels, it's hard to get off the ground. Now again, I'm not sure what the spec sheet says for seat height. It may be very similar, but there is a little bit more width to the seat here. Now the width comes from a few different places. Instead of having 2 cylinders side by side in this is a 4-cylinder engine. So when we talk about the differences, a lot of people think it's just that bike with more power and a few other tech. But what it is it changes the feel of the bike. Because it's a little bit bigger and a little bit heavier, it loses some of that gentle, slow speed, sporty feel. Now I don't want to overplay that because this is still a very sporty bike, driving around town and that kind of thing. And when I talk about the weight, it's still way lighter than a typical long distance touring cruiser. So it's not a heavy bike. It's still very manageable left to right here. You can see I don't have any issues bringing it across. It still has a large fuel tank with good range. So all of that's there. But the overall feel of this bike is it loses some slower speed playfulness and makes up for that with just raw power. And the raw power changes the way you're going to ride this bike. So let's just talk about that first of all overall. So here's me in the seating position. You can see it's a very similar seating position. I'm very comfortable, still have an adjustable windshield. It's wider, like everything else is wider here. And the feel of these bikes is that they're very large, but the reality is all of the weight or all of the size out front here doesn't weigh a whole lot. It's just plastics. You still have great wind protection here. So when we talk about that power, how does that power play out? Well, it gets to you in a few different ways. First of all, you have the Ninja 1000 engine, which is the largest engine out of the Ninja lineup. It's 1043cc. That's bigger than the H2 engine. So it is a large engine. It is it's tuned differently than in the Ninja. So it actually makes less peak horsepower. So at the very, very top of your rev range, you're losing some horsepower. Now, a lot of people seem to get caught up on that as if they're going to be riding a bike with this big of an engine at redline all the time. You're just not going to be doing that. So what that means is that they make this a little bit less horsepower at the very top end, and it's very drivable. So you have immense power in that lower to mid to even upper range of this bike, and that is where you're driving this bike. You're not redlining in every gear for a couple reasons. Once you've redlined in second gear, you are so far beyond the legal limit. You don't want to be redlining in third and fourth and fifth and sixth gear as well. So you have that power down low, and you have access to that power as well because you have a quick shifter for both up and down, which means you're going to use the clutch to get it going into first gear, and then if you have the quick shifter turned on, you don't need to use the clutch to very quickly shift up. You can keep on the throttle and shift, and that makes a long tour easier. It also makes it a lot of fun and gives a real sporty feeling. The other thing with a 1000cc bike and a little bit larger bike is you don't lose any feel really by adding a passenger. Now obviously it feels different with a passenger on, but this is a very large passenger seat. Both bikes have very good passenger seats. This one's larger again. And because it has that torque and that power, you still have all your passing power, even all your passing power at well above highway speed limits, you still have that all accessible to you. So the power makes a difference, but so does the technology. We talked about the 650 having better suspension than any other 650 in the class because it's adjustable front and rear. This is electronic suspension. So let's start taking a closer look at the differences here, the electronic suspension, how it works, what it does, why it makes a difference. And we're going to start explaining that price difference as we look at the technology. So let's zoom in a little closer. So let's start by looking at the dash. You can see right away there's a difference. You still have a TFT display, but they don't have to fit a tachometer in there because you have a tachometer over here. So let's bring it to life and see what it looks like. And this is, again, more unique to this bike here. So Kawasaki, you can see right there. Top left there, let's just see if we can zoom a little more. The coloring of this screen, for whatever reason, the coating on the front, oops, there we go, sorry. The coating on the front of this screen seems to play with my camera more than the coating of the other screens. To my eyes, it's just as crystal clear, but for whatever reason, doesn't film as clear, and the colors are kind of different. So there was a bright green end there that looks identical to me in the other screen, but it doesn't film the same way. N is, of course, your gear indicator. You had that on the other bike. You have your fuel gauge down low. Without having to put the tachometer in there, you have a different look to your speedometer. And you can see it says road up top. So road right there can be set to road. It can be set to sport. And then we got to cycle back through road, and there's a rain mode as well. So what that does is it sets both the power level. You have a low and a high power level on this bike. It also helps you set traction control and other things. So road is what you're going to normally drive in, and that works pretty well up top there. And again, it's very weird looking at through this screen because for whatever reason this camera will not focus on this, but they look identical in person. So, and then in here you have a lot of the same stuff, your fuel mileage, your odometers, that kind of thing. But there is one more piece where we're going to try to zoom in here and see if we can get that corner there. So let's see if we can get that clear enough to film. It looks like I'm going to have to switch angles. Let's just do that right now. All right, so we're looking at the far right side, and you see a little person in there. Let's start talking about what that person does. You can adjust the preload on this bike with just a button on the handlebars. We'll show you the buttons in a second here. But right now you have a little man there. That is a man, person, an individual there. That is the preload setting. So that is just to fit one rider. And basically, because it's electronic suspension, what you're going to see now is the bike is moving. I haven't moved the tripod here, but it's raising up. It's actually running into the tripod a little bit. Now your preload is set to one person with luggage. And let's just tap it on one more time, and you're going to see now it's setting your preload to 2 people with luggage. Now, to be fair, yep, it's just moving the tripod there as the hand grip is touching my tripod. But you can see how it's very visually easy to identify right there. Now, the other bike did have preload adjustment by hand. You could do that on the rear shocks with the, or the rear shock with the hand preload. This one you have electronic suspension, but that's not the only thing the electronic suspension does. So let's just talk about that really quickly. So in addition to adjusting the preload, this bike also senses what's going on with the road. It has an IMU, that's a computer inside that can sense if the bike is like this, if it's like that, if it's twisting any which way. It senses all of the movement of the bike essentially. And what that does is it works with a number of systems, including the electronic suspension, to understand what's going on, and it can adjust the suspension based on what's going on. So as you grab a whole bunch of front brake and a normal bike would really start to dive, this one can stay steady because it can instantly adjust that front fork to handle that pressure so it doesn't dive as much. It can also adjust it for the road so you feel a very smooth road. And then you have that IMU that works with a cornering management function electronic system, so you can come into a corner hot. It can help you keep the line around the corner and help you trace that line out of the corner because it's sensing the angle of the bike, your suspension is working well with you, and it's working with the power. It can sense not just when there's braking, but when there's engine braking, so your traction control and all those things are working together to trace a perfect line into a corner and a perfect line out of a corner to keep you safe. So while the suspension is adjustable for preload, it's also adjustable for the road. You also have the ability for having traction control and other settings to work with you, and ABS, all those things, to work with you in corners that take this touring bike and still make it a fun, decent high-speed cornerer, which is also part of the playfulness of this bike. You combine that with the quick shifter, and you've got your hands always on the throttle, your gas and brake, that kind of thing. Bring the gears up, bring the gears down. You're not having to adjust to that clutch, and it makes it a very, very, very fun bike. So there are so many electronics in here that monitor all these different types of things that make this just as fun to ride as the smaller 650, and in a lot of ways more fun because you've got that power immediately there. When you dive on the brakes, you've got really consistent suspension performance because it's adapting in real time to what you're doing, and that system alone is a big deal. This bike also has cruise control, so we're going to take a look at some of the controls here on this bike and compare them to the 650. We'll start with the 650 just so you see what every bike has, and then we'll move to this bike to show you a few of the advantages. So taking a look at the 650, this is pretty simple motorcycle stuff, and that's really, what you want in a motorcycle is you want it to be simple, easy to control. So what you've got, regular high beam, signal lights, horn, and hazard light. Hazard lights are really important on a touring type bike. You have a little trigger piece right here, which you can kind of see on my finger there. That can allow you to flash your high beam just by touching it instead of having to do that all the time. You can just flash it to get people's attention. You have adjustable brake levers here, or clutch lever in this case, and brake lever on the other side. And then the only button that you have that's extra is this selection switch in the center and then an up and down type thing. The selection switch in the center generally deals with your traction control, so you can change that traction control from off to level 1 to level 2. And then this changes an upper level odometer display. This changes a lower level, usually fuel efficiency, battery condition, those kind of things, or battery voltage, those kind of things. So very easy to control. This is the upper control, this is the lower control in your dash, this is your traction control. Very simple stuff, which is kind of what you like. Now, as you move to a more complicated bike, you'd expect things to feel more complicated. They're actually pretty good. So let's show you what you get on the Ninja 1000 or the Versys 1000. So on the Versys 1000, you add cruise control over here, which changes sort of what you can do here. Now, what's cool about this bike is there are literally no extra features on it. So everything you see is standard, including the heated grips right here. You can add heated grips to the Versys 650 if you want to, but they come standard here on the Versys 1000. So overall, similar controls down here. You have a horn, signal, and a different style button, but you have the hazard lights as well. What you'll notice here is your high beam and low beam is not here. It's a large switch that really doesn't do a whole lot. So what Kawasaki does is moves it over to here where you have that trigger. You can still flash your high beam like that, but now you're going to turn your high beams on by pressing it away from you. Then you can pull it off like that. So you press away from you to get into high beams and unlock it like that. Simple stuff. You still have the adjustable clutch lever and brake levers there, so same stuff there. And then what you have is your cruise control over here, a little reset switch for the dash over here, and then here's your mode buttons, which can change your riding modes, can change other functions in the dash, and your preload button. Remember when we adjusted the preload with the single rider, 2 riders, and then or a rider and luggage, and then 2 riders and luggage? You just hold this button down and it does that. So all of the controls, riding modes, and preload buttons are right there, easy to reach, simple to do, and in a logical spot. So although it kind of looks like there's a lot of controls, it works very, very intuitively to make this bike very easy to ride. So remember, we've got high and low power modes, we've got different rider modes, we've got adjustable suspension that works, and we've got cruise control, which is an electronic cruise control. You set it for an exact speed and it will hold that speed for you. So all really good stuff and simple stuff to use. So we looked at the front of these bikes. It's worth pointing out that the rear of these bikes are also different as well. Now again, both of these bikes are capable of taking passengers quite comfortably. I have this little stop sign here. I'm going to use the exact same stop sign on the rear of the Ninja, or the Versys 1000. Boy, I keep saying Ninja 1000. So the Versys 650 here, you can see you've got a good back pad here for the driver, and then it kind of curls in here and has a scoop down. Now I would want to point out that out of all the 650 bikes that we have here, this is probably the largest seat. The only one that might compete with it is the Z650 RS, the Retro Sport, which has a nice big old-fashioned seat, but every other bike has a smaller passenger seat. So again, fully capable of taking a passenger here on the 650, good grab rails here, and those grab rails are part of the luggage holding pieces. Again, very easy to remove the luggage right there. So good passenger area here. You can add a rear rack and a top box here, but it does not come standard with the rear rack. So let's just show you the difference in the 1000 now, and I'm going to take this exact same sticker over just for a size comparison. So I'm not sure how well it translates on video, but you definitely have more width here, and you also have a little bit more contour to the seat. The top panel here doesn't sit flush to the actual padding when there's not somebody on it. So you can start to see that there is that little bit of a line through here, and you really have a lip up at the back where the last seat's kind of narrowed and kind of curled down. This one has a nice lip up, which is nice for a bike that accelerates. You don't have to put that top box on for your passenger to feel like there is a little bit behind them. They're not going to slide off. And again, they're not going to slide off the other one either, but on a bike that has significantly more power, this is a lot of horsepower on this bike, having that little lip there does make your passenger accommodations better. Side rails here are very, very similar because they're designed to hold the same rails here. You do get a little rack included on this one, which allows you to strap down kind of anything you want. If you were to go camping and want to take a tent along, this is a really easy place to stick something like that. You can get a top box if you wanted, various sizes, right from Kawasaki or of course the aftermarket, and of course that just kind of screws in there. So larger seat, more comfortable seat for a passenger, and again, little differences here too. This is a little bit larger area here, a little bit more height and a little bit more width in there. So overall, bigger seat, probably a little bit more comfort, but I will say the 650 is still very comfortable for someone like myself. So the majority of the benefits of the 1000 are all about technology, some of the things that are harder to show on a video, but there's some practical benefits as well. So we talked about this wider windshield, both of them have adjustable windshield. You have a real big scoop through the middle of this one, and this one only lets the air up through the bottom. Now again, not a huge difference. You have to let air through to sort of reduce the pressure behind there. It keeps you from having buffeting issues. Again, because they're both adjustable, you're going to be able to sort of deal with that buffeting by moving them where you need to. But again, a little bit larger, more touring-oriented windshield here. Now you also have a couple other little things that are interesting for a touring perspective. This one has what's called cornering lights. You can see these lights down here. There's no lights down here. What's cool about cornering lights is, and I've used this exact same description in the past, if this is the road, or let's say if this is the road and this is your headlight cutoff on a modern motorcycle, which is usually pretty sharp and pretty bright, as you turn the direction you're going, you actually lose light the way you're going. So what's cool about this is that IMU, that technology that can sense the orientation of the bike, can sense that you're leaning. It can notify you in the dash, your instant lean angle and your top lean angle. But as it starts to lean, if we were turning that way, one of these lights would light up, and then the next, and then the next, depending on how far you're leaning. So as you lean further, the next light comes on, and then the next light comes on, and they're each individually aimed. And the idea being, as you turn and lose light in the direction you're going, these ones fill in that light. So again, if you're touring on a dark road in an unfamiliar place, and you start taking a corner, the more you lean, the more light you're going to get where you need it because they're individually aimed. So that's using the technology inside of that IMU while also giving you practical benefits. Now, both of these bikes are chain-driven bikes. This one has an exhaust down here that ends right there. Because of that, you can't get a Kawasaki center stand on that. Now you can work around it. There's, I think SW Motec sells one. It's a little finicky to put your center stand. You have to put your side stand down to get you up on the center stand, but you can do that. So if you're doing a lot of long distance touring, like really long distance touring, where you might need to do chain maintenance on the trip, you can get a center stand on this one and make it work. It's just not available through Kawasaki, simply because I think it kind of interacts with your side stand a little bit. It's not as big of a deal as it seems. But the idea is you're probably going to be doing weekend tours on this. You're not going to have to do a whole lot of chain maintenance on the way. On this bike, you might do multi-week tours. Now, why do a chain drive on a bike that's going to be touring capable? We've had that question in the past. Simply put, a chain drive allows that power to get to the wheel. Shaft drive kills power, a belt drive kills power, and a chain drive allows you to have that sport in sport touring. So it brings that power back. Now, if you need to do some chain maintenance, this one comes standard with a center stand. So you have another practical benefit. The other reason I like a center stand, and I put it on my almost all of my bikes, is because if you get to a spot where you have a little soft ground, a center stand is going to give you a little bit more stability. So you've really got a bike set up to be great for sporty. This one gets you the natural way, a little bit lighter weight, typical adjustable suspension, and just sort of a fun, agile chassis. Once you get into a bigger bike, you lose some agility just because you have to. It's a bigger engine, it's a bigger bike, and it has more power, but you gain some of that agility back through really good electronic controls that allow you to have some fun and allow it to adapt the bike. So when you compare this to a typical touring machine, this thing is an absolute blast. And even though it costs significantly more than this, there's value in that. But where there's really value in this bike is comparing it to the competition. It's 2/3 the price of a lot of the competitors' bikes, and it gives you all of the fun, great reliability, and so much fun. So let's wrap up by talking about who these bikes are really for. So let's start with the Versys 650. Again, I've owned this bike. I'm a massive fan of this bike, and this is such an underrated bike for a typical rider. If you think about a typical rider, you want to enjoy a whole bunch of different riding scenarios. You want something that you can just commute across town with easily, quickly, having some fun, hanging out in country roads in the corners. This one is great for that. And like I said, for most people sport riding, those people who buy a Ninja 650, this thing will keep up without any issues. You can corner just as fast on this. Now, if you take it to a racetrack, sure, you're giving up something there, but you're having all of that sporting capability with a more upright seating position and a comfortable ride. You gain better suspension on this with the adjustable suspension. You gain better wind protection, which can extend your riding season. So if you're looking at a value, you know, if you can only ride a bike 6 months of the year here in Canada, but you can stretch it to 8 months of the year, this wind protection can make a difference with these hand covers and everything else in there. And of course you can add things like heated grips in this, but you could add those to many other bikes. So the Versys 650 gives you the ability to do all of your around town riding and have some fun, but with the hard bags on that hold your full face helmet, you can add a top box if you wanted to from the, like right from the start or later on down the road. You can tour on this bike. So this is a bike that you can basically do all the types of riding that you would want to do. On the 1000, what you're getting is a true step up. This is, for many people, the only motorcycle you'll ever need. You lose some of the little bit lighter weight playfulness around town. This is a large bike. But that being said, in the class of bikes that can truly tour for days and weeks on end, this isn't that heavy, and forgetting the spec sheet, it's about how it feels. It really doesn't feel that heavy, especially for a touring bike. Having all of the electronic controls in here means that whether you run into any weather, any type of conditions, you can feel confident and comfortable on this bike. And the real benefit to this bike is if you are going to take your tours on your own, no problem. If you're going to take your tours with a second person, this is as comfortable as many other big bikes, and you don't have to get something that doesn't handle, that isn't fun, to do everything for you. I really like the technology in this bike. It is worth it over this one, but there is a big step up. So if you're just looking for an economical way to have a bike that does everything and does everything well, this is still a top spec bike in that 650 class. If you're doing longer tours and you're doing them just with yourself, this one is perfectly fine. Adding cruise control, gotta admit, that alone is a nice option, but you're not just adding cruise control, a bigger engine, and a bigger seat. You're adding a whole lot of technologies you can't see, and I think the underrated one is that adjustable electronic suspension that handles things for you and allows you to intervene with the suspension. That is a huge piece on this bike that makes it really enjoyable. So, both these bikes can serve the same purpose, but one of them is going to go about it in a different way. Which one's best for you? You can let us know in the comments, and if you own these bikes, let us know in the comments as well so we can build a video database of information of people that understand these bikes. And if you have questions, make sure you let me know in the comment section below. We'll come back to you in the comments and in future videos. And if you want to see these bikes, they are available here at Jim Gilbert's Wheels Deals, Jim Gilbert's PowerSports, Canada's #1 volume Kawasaki dealer. Thanks everybody for watching.